3PO, you tell that slimy piece of worm-ridden filth he'll get no such pleasure from us, right?
Jabba, this is your last chance. Free us or die.
Kurs Nummer!
Greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to another radically rendered episode of Mandovision. Nargai Tom. And thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. We're back, and we're so glad you're here for it. Remember to reach out to us on social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com, with your thoughts, your inquiries, your queries, your long-form theses. Do it. Hit me up. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, and following the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. How is everyone doing? It's another week upon us. That Writers Guild strike is still happening, so thus far, not a lot of news on the Star Wars front. But hey, as we record this, it's only Monday. Maybe things will shake out later. Let's see how it goes. We're back this week to close out Volume 2 of Star Wars Visions. We're here to talk about the last 3 episodes. And again, just like the first 6 that we've covered, they really do a good job of having very different takes, very different styles, and very different interpretations of Star Wars in these 3 episodes. So I really have a great amount of respect for this volume of Visions in particular. I as much as I did enjoy the first one, I think the second volume has exceeded all my expectations for it, and I came away liking far more of these episodes than I thought I would. I found some of them to be, quite impactful. And again, I've made mention of it before, but sort of like that unique infusion of each of these animation studios' unique cultural identities. Kind of, sorry, but the sort of the cultural identity that each of these studios has, kind of being infused into their take on Star Wars. So that just made for a really, I think, refreshing sort of breath of fresh air for this volume of Visions, to sort of see that represented on the screen. And I again, we have talked about it in many ways. I think there is versions of Star Wars for everyone, and now it's fun to see everyone coming up with versions of Star Wars. And I just really like that. I think this volume has been stellar. So again, without a lot of news to get into, we won't waste a lot of time with a lengthy preamble. So it's just time. Let's do it. Let's get into the episodes. The final 3 episodes, Star Wars Visions Volume 2, kind of closing out our coverage, our sort of long protracted coverage of this year's May the 4th be with you. Because as you notice, we have continued to play sound clips from Return of the Jedi as we sort of celebrate the 40th anniversary of that film as well right now. So this will kind of wrap that all up, I suppose, which makes me a little sad because it was really fun reconnecting with Return of the Jedi this past month. It's been kind of a hoot to see it in theaters, watch it a few different times at home on the Disney Plus, and even break out my old the only pressing of the DVD that contains the original '83 theatrical film. With the original Jabba's Palace music scene and the original Ewoks celebration scene and Sebastian Shaw as the Force ghost of Anakin Skywalker at the very end of the film, all that stuff. Seeing that original '83 version still gets me deep in the heart. So enough of that, though. We're gonna finish out Visions Volume 2. You know what that means? It is time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
I'm sure Luke wasn't on that thing when it blew.
He wasn't. I could feel it.
You love him. Don't you?
Yes.
All right. I understand. Fine. When he comes back, I won't get in the way.
It's not like that at all. He's my brother.
Interesting transition there as we speak about brothers from Leia informing Han Solo that Luke is her long-lost brother. We have an interesting story of a brother and a sister coming up. Before we kind of dive into this episode, I do want to mention real quickly, it was sort of funny how last week's I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say last week's, but the last episode we did, the 3 studios involved in those stories were studios where I was sort of shockingly surprised to find out that I was familiar with some of their past work, some of the animation work that they've done, and I've seen it. This week we go to 3 studios where I have not seen their work before, but maybe you have. So, with that in mind, let's talk about Episode 7 of Star Wars Visions, Volume 2, original air date May 4th, 2023. This is from Studio 88 Pictures. Now, they have done, apparently, Troll Hunters is what they're known for. So maybe that's something you know. Apparently, it's more childlike. So if you have the children in your life, maybe this is something you're familiar with. That's very, very cool. This episode is titled The Bandits of Golak. Golak? I think I got the pronunciation right. I said it initially with like that hard K, like it was kind of Klingon-y, and it's not. It's like Golak. I think I got it. I think I finally got it there. This one has got our plot for this episode: fleeing from their village by train and pursued by ferocious Imperial forces, a boy and his Force-sensitive younger sister seek refuge in a vibrant and dangerous Dahaba. I think I'm saying that word correctly. At least I hope I am. And I also hope I will be pronouncing the name of this wonderful voice cast correctly as well. Our primary voice cast in this episode is Shiraj Sharma, Sonal Kushal, Niraj Kabi, and Lilette Dubé. And they're all fantastic. I was insanely captivated by this episode. I found its animation style to be riveting, exciting. The color palette was unique and festive. Its use of light and shadow to be striking and memorable. And I really enjoyed the story. Now, I want it to be said, for the record, this episode has a problem that another episode in this installment of Visions Volume 2 also had. The third episode of the season, I believe. Let me double check that really quickly. Yes, it was in episode 3, In the Stars, a similar issue happened as initially happened in this episode. And it happened early. And that was the sort of like disobedient younger sibling, right? The one who doesn't listen to the sort of, more world-weary older sibling who knows that they're to protect their younger sibling, they must have them not kind of be maybe not, I don't want to say not be who they are, but maybe when you're on a train full of people who want to appease the Empire, You don't display your Force talents. And despite the warnings of her brother, our young character named was it Sanal? Let me double check that really quickly here. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Ronnie. The actor who portrays her is Sanal. Ronnie is very, again, I don't want to use the word disobedient, but she's childlike, right? She wants to do what she wants to do. She doesn't quite understand the implications of simply playing this flute and summoning it from her brother's pack, through the air, where all these people in the train, again, who, at the very least, if they're not Imperial sympathizers, they are at the very least, willing to rat out Force-sensitive people because they know that they'll keep them out of trouble, at the very, very least. So, initially, I was concerned that would be a problem in this episode. But as is the case with episode 3, the child's actions sort of spur things into motion for the episode. And this is an episode where we get what I talked about earlier, that unique cultural infusion. The Studio 88 Pictures is based out of India, and this episode is infused with much of that culture, much of that just little injections of that world into Star Wars. And again, I found the animation and everything to be unique and striking. I love the way they sort of incorporated a lot of the Indian culture, a lot of aspects of what we know about India into the episode, without making it without changing the basic tenets of what Star Wars is. So I really liked the way they blended the two things together there, because I thought the story was awesome. I love the train ride through a sort of familiar, sort of like Tatooine-esque world. I love the notion of the rebellion, of rebels against the Empire, striking from these canyons. So much of it was just utterly fascinating. And then you get to the Dhabi, right? You get to like the town, this little outpost in the middle of the desert where our characters are trying to get to, and you sort of see a little bit more of the taste of life on like a slower level, right? This episode is great because it's got a lot going on. You start on the train, you have the fast-paced train stuff, you have Imperial pursuit on the train. Once they know that Ronnie is Force sensitive and the Imperials come looking for her, and then you have the rebels attacking the train as Ronnie and her brother Shahrukh are trying to escape and protect themselves. And then you get to the Dhabi, right? Which is like, again, it sort of pauses for a moment. We collect our breath as they transition from the train station and the train pursuit to going through the desert to get to this Dhabi. And again, Ronnie using her Force-sensitive powers. At least that's what it's perceived as, right? Until we find out that it's actually the older sort of caretaker of this facility, Rugal, who is using the Force. And we get Star Wars, we get Inquisitors, right? There's an Inquisitor in pursuit. A Force sensitive had been reported. Ronnie's incident on the train did not go beneath the notice of Inquisitors. So we have them infused in this episode as well. And it's Niraj Kabi who does the voice of the Inquisitor in this episode. And he's chilling. I really enjoyed the portrayal, the voice acting alone, the sort of menace. And then when all the plates are sort of floating above his head and they come crashing down, and it's not Ronnie that's doing it. And then we get into a lightsaber battle in the desert. It's just super cool. It's got all those sort of familiar Star Wars visuals that we love so dearly, but it has like the uniqueness of what of what 88 Pictures is bringing to it, with that sort of infusion of Indian culturalism. I just really enjoyed this episode far more than I thought it would, despite the sort of annoying child factor. It didn't hinder this episode overall at all to me. And once the Inquisitors is dealt with, and we find out that the Rugal character is sort of manning that Dhabi as sort of like this last outpost for Jedi, right? As sort of like this oasis in the desert for Jedi, and we see the secret passage open up beneath the pool of water, and all those. Again, another striking visual. We are reminded once again of a very Star Wars thing, like the choice that many have to make to walk the path of the Jedi, which is to forego attachment, to forego relationships, to be able to walk away from her brother, her protector, to be on this path, to be on this new life. And I think in a way that we maybe haven't seen in quite some time in Star Wars. This episode really crystallizes the struggle of that choice of leaving, the person who has guided you, protected you, kept you safe, to go and walk a different path. It's to leave that behind, to go to the unknown. It's a very Star Wars thing, and I don't know if it's been explored in a visual medium quite this way. I was really sort of touched by Ronnie and Sharuk's relationship, and sort of the sadness of the decision, right? Like, we all know it's sad. Like, the institution of the Jedi Knights, and sort of like the faults of that institution alone. Like, we've talked about them in the past, and this is another example of those faults of that institution coming under a little bit of scrutiny because of their belief that you have to forego attachment to be an effective Jedi Knight, an effective Force wielder in the battle against the darkness. And again, it's sort of, it's just very Star Wars. But I was affected by how they played this out. And again, this episode sort of surprised me in that regard. I didn't expect it to kind of get me where it got me, and I just think it's well executed, well delivered, well done. It's 9 buckets for me. I don't want to say too much more about it because I feel like I'm sort of tripping along my talking points here. But again, just to sort of reemphasize it one more time, look at that decision. Like, all these at the time of the prequels, it's fairly well established, and I think this even goes back into the High Republic and for the generations beforehand. The Force-sensitive children are found early, so that they haven't formed attachments yet, and we're seeing Ronnie, this character who is similar to Anakin when he comes into contact with Jedi Knights, and he already has these attachments. I would sort of be curious if Ronnie's journey is similar to Annie's in that sense. Or if she's more capable, more willing to forgo the attachments. And, we sort of get a hint that she will walk this path, but she will not forget her brother, with the closing moments, with the flute floating up in the water, the one she snatched from his bag at the beginning of the episode to trigger the pursuit of the Imperials, to trigger the Inquisitor to come looking for them. Again, that sort of moment of the disobedient child kicking everything off that I don't generally like as a story point, working out very effectively as it kind of comes full circle around. So, just a really well executed, well thought out episode. I didn't mention the writer director, which was Ishan Shukla. Excuse me. They did a fantastic job with this one. I was really surprised by this one. Check it out. 9 buckets for the Bandits of Golak.
I would like to see the baby.
All right, let's talk about Episode 8, The Pit. Original air date May 4th, 2023. This is from Studio D'Art Shachillo. I said that completely wrong, and I'm positive of that. Sorry about that, fellas. This one... This studio is known for their work on Attack on Titan, which is an insanely popular show that I've never watched. But I am familiar with their work on the Castlevania anime series that's on Netflix. So a little passing familiarity with these guys in this one. It's written and directed by Leandre Thomas. The plot for this one is as follows. A fearless young prisoner, forced to dig Kyber by the Empire, plans a risky escape for he and his people. Our cast for this episode: David Diggs is Crux. Anika Noni Rose is also in. I shouldn't have said Crux. I just wanted to read their names. So let's go back to let's just say David Diggs, Anika Noni Rose, Jordan Currett, and Cedric Yarborough are our top voice cast. But this episode also includes Steve Blum and Matthew Wood, voices familiar to us all as fans of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So that's a lot of fun as well. This is it's a very anime-influenced episode. Not surprising. Again, I I don't think I specified it, but the Studio d'Art Satgyo is from Japan. So kind of keeping a connection to what we did in volumes 1 of Star Wars Visions with the many Japanese art studios that were involved in that. This episode, it conjures up a lot of themes and ideas and visuals similar to what we saw in Andor. The Imperial impression, my goodness. The Imperial oppression of a people to facilitate the growth of a city that didn't exist, right? So like, these prisoners are brought out to the middle of nowhere. These stormtroopers have like this magic glowy sticky thingy, not glowy sticky thingy, but it's like a mineral detector, almost like a metal detector, right? And they're looking for something, and we don't quite know what yet. And then their machine beeps up, and that's where like they point like, that's it, let's do it, let's dig here. And that's where these prisoners begin to dig the pit. And they go down, and they go down, and they go down, and eventually one of them strikes the Kyber crystal that the Imperials were looking for. Now, it's interesting and it's unique in the sense that these prisoners are mining the Kyber crystal, but not for some Imperial superweapon, or at least not that we are privy to seeing in this episode, but it fuels the construction of what is essentially like the Crystal City, right? This entire city comes up out of nowhere, built on the back of these prisoners, of these slaves, essentially. This forced labor at the very least, but I think slave is more accurate. And you know, they do this wonderful time lapse of the pit growing both in circumference and in depth, and this city sort of rising just beyond it, just outside of its reach. And these prisoners, as they go deeper and deeper into the pit, not knowing what's going on around them, not knowing what's happening on the surface, they are completely removed, completely isolated. They're just simply tools of the Imperial war machine at this point. And then one brave prisoner decides it's time to climb out of the pit. And again, maybe it's just me, maybe I've seen way too many movies, but the climb out of the pit, it totally reminds me of Bruce Wayne climbing out of the pit in The Dark Knight Rises. so it's like that. And then the character Crux is the one who rises up. He's gonna bring attention to what the Empire is doing. He's gonna rally these people behind him. And initially his pleas fall on deaf ears. And again, it's very much like what we saw in Andor, sort of like the blinders that many people put on to live their day-to-day lives, not really realizing this sort of oppression and tyranny going on around them, just so they can get by day to day. And by the end, when Crux is discovered and the Imperials take him back to the pit, he thinks he's failed. He thinks these people have been oblivious to him. They don't care. They don't want to know. They don't want to know that this city that they live in, that this city that is a key part of their life and their existence, was built in the back of slaves, right? And so he thinks he's failed. And so these Imperials, they take him back to the pit, and they're going to throw him down to the bottom of the pit. And at this point, the pit is like insanely deep. Like we're talking like, miles deep, I would imagine. And Crux, after being tossed back into the pit, he's not going to survive that fall. So he dies thinking that he's failed his people that are trapped in the pit, that the people of this Crystal City have turned their back to the plight of the people in the pit. And there's a nice little message in it, and I don't remember exactly what he says to the young girl character, but it's something like, "Look to the light of the stars, let the stars kind of like light your way." Having that quote would be handy right now, and I did not think that far ahead because I wasn't sure I'd talk about it necessarily. But the people begin chanting, and it sort of is this unified chant, and sort of the disruption that Crux caused in the city, I think alerts them to something beyond the walls of their sheltered life in the Crystal City. Makes them aware of what's happening beyond, and they all come out and they demand answers, and they demand that the Empire do something about this, that they end this, that this must stop. And they essentially drive the Empire away. Okay, all right. I would have been more believing of the Empire just massacring everybody, but whatever, okay. And these people liberating the prisoners of the pit, including the young girl who was so inspired by Crux. And it's touching, it's thoughtful, it's got a lot of, I was gonna say it's deep, but with an episode titled The Pit, I don't want to say that. I don't want to, but there's a lot of meaning, there's a lot of subtext in this episode. You can take a lot out of it, and that's very, very cool. I think they did a really nice job executing this episode. It's like slightly too, I'm not even gonna say that. I'm gonna back it up. This episode is a lot about hope and keeping hope alive, which is a very Star Wars theme. So in that regard, this episode delivers the goods. It hits on the right things. And again, it comes at this time after we've seen Andor, and it sort of reminds us of the brutality of tyranny, of the tyranny of the Empire in specifically. So keep that in mind when you're watching this episode. I did enjoy it. It's a little slow on the pacing for me. That was sort of like my biggest gripe with this episode, was I thought it was paced out a little slowly, but I did like the story they're telling overall. I did like that these people did eventually take those blinders off in the city and find it and come to aid the people who they didn't even know were the ones responsible for building their homes by mining that kyber crystal. So very, very interesting episode. And I think I don't recall exactly the ending of every episode from Volume 1, but in Volume 2, this is the only episode that has an after credits moment. And it's of this piece of graffiti that says The Pit. And there's a lot more going on in this episode. I've only kind of scratched the surface, the very big broad strokes. I didn't even talk about like the creatures that inhabit the planet in sort of like that desert wasteland. That sort of end up aiding Crux on his climb up out of the pit. But watch the episodes. There's a lot of really unique ideas in this one that I think you will dig. Oh, I did it. I blew it. I said dig in an episode called The Pit. Gosh dang it. That was not the plan. It's 8 buckets on this one. It's a bit of a think piece. So stew on that one. Yeah. Oh boy.
Bounty hunting is a complicated profession.
So for the final installment of Volume 2 of Star Wars Visions, we have Episode 9, Owl's Song. And I know I had the pronunciation down a couple days ago and I've slipped, but I think it's Owl's Song. Original air date May 4th, 2023. From the studio known as Triggerfish from South Africa. Written and directed by Daniel Clark. The voice cast for this episode includes, and I'm going to butcher some names, and I'm very, very sorry. Mapilo Giante, Dineo Du Toa, Tomisho Masha, and Cynthia Irivo are sort of our primary voice casts for this episode. Our plot: an alien child who longs to sing is raised by her loving but stern father to stay quiet because of the calamitous effect her voice has on the crystals in the nearby mines. This episode is perhaps the most unique in this season of Star Wars Visions. It is visually stunning. Whether it's animation of some sort of computer CGI or like a next level blending of stop motion and CGI, I don't know for sure, but it's breathtakingly gorgeous. It is insanely hyper detailed stuff. It just fuels the imagination for what they're doing with this episode as far as the animation goes. I just was completely blown away. Every shot I saw, every the camera move that I saw was just breathtakingly beautiful. The episode is gorgeous from top to bottom. It's just really, really well done. The question is, does this story work for you? It's a very unique take on Visions. I'm sorry, it's a very unique take on Star Wars, but it incorporates a lot of familiar elements of Star Wars. It opens up, it sets the table for us of the Sith Lords corrupting the purity of the kyber crystals and making on this one particular world. They're all red now. They've been infused with the dark side, so they're dangerous. They're volatile, and this young girl, God dang it, I'm just butchering your name, but this young girl who has a connection, has a seeming, yeah, we'll just go with connection to these crystals. And as the episode plays out, we wonder, is she falling sway to the dark lore of these infected kyber crystals? Or is there more going on here? You know, we meet a Jedi. We find out that these crystals are being mined so that the Jedi can, through great pains, attempt to purify them from the dark side energy that's corrupted these crystals. So the people of this planet mine kyber for the Jedi so that it may be purified with great painstaking efforts by the Jedi. And this young girl is fascinated by the whole thing, fascinated by the process. And her father has urged her to not sing. It's what she wants to do. It's what she yearns to do. But she's sort of being stifled by the overprotective father, right? And ultimately, what we find out is that her voice, the harmony, whether it was harmony or the resonance, whatever it is, her voice is like the ultimate purifier of these corrupt kyber crystals. And you know, it brings her powers to the attention of the Jedi who comes to this planet every so often to collect crystals to harbor for the purification process of the Jedi. And again, we come to the decision to leave your attachments behind to pursue new opportunity, new life out there amongst the stars, to be the first to, and in this young girl's case, to be the first to leave her planet. And her father, again, he's overprotective, but he's very loving. He's not oppressive of her in any sense. He just cares so deeply for his child that he doesn't want to risk her safety by her going into these mines and exposing herself to this dark side energy down there. I don't know what else to say about this one. It's very straightforward, but it is just beautiful. It is possibly the most beautiful episode of the entire season as far as like its look, the texture of its animations. It is just it has a very 3D, very tactile sense to it. It's stunning. I really, really like this episode a lot, and I give it 8 buckets. I know my review of it is fairly short, but it's a fairly direct episode, right? There's the things happening, but you're mostly just drawn in by what you're seeing. Oh my god, I said drawn in an animation related review. Holy smokes. I gotta get out of here, folks. This is good night, everybody. I'll see you later. Woo! Oh boy. But you're captivated by the animation you see on the screen. It is beyond anything I've seen before. I've never seen anything like it. Triggerfish, if this is what they do, this is like a labor of love for them because of the detail they incorporate. Again, that's the sort of texture, that textile feel they have to everything in this. It's just next level stuff. It's awesome. So pretty to look at. And it's a very unique take on Star Wars, but it's still very Star Wars. You know, again, you're exploring the idea of the Sith corrupting kyber crystals, the purification, and the idea of this innocent child being the one that is the ultimate purifier, and her having to leave her protective father behind to explore beyond what she knows. It's classic Star Wars stuff. It's everything that we know Star Wars to be. So I give it a strong 8 buckets. I lean towards 9. But again, it does have a slight, in my opinion, a slight pacing problem, but it's still stunning stuff. Check it out. Don't sleep on this volume of Visions. You know, maybe you didn't dig every single thing in volume 1, but I think volume 2 brings a lot to the table. Again, the unique culturalism that each episode has from its respective studio, I think is a game changer as far as Visions goes moving forward. If there is to be a volume 3, 4, and down the line, I love what this season offers Star Wars fans. Something for everyone, and I found it really hard to try and pick a favorite. I was overwhelmed with the options presented. You know, part of me was like, oh, maybe the first one, the Sith episode was the best. They started with the banger and lured us all in for the rest of the ride. But again, I was really blown away with episode 7. I thought the Bandits of Golak was awesome. So it would take subsequent viewings to maybe determine a favorite. But there are a lot of like really high-end episodes in this volume. So don't overlook it. You know, maybe you're not like a big animation fan. I can't claim to be the world's biggest animation fan anymore. But there was a time and a place where I loved animation stuff from across the globe. Those days have passed, sadly. But this is sort of a fun way for me to see what's going on in that world nowadays. See what these studios across the planet are doing, and to be blown away by their efforts, by the advancements in animation technology. So I really did enjoy every single episode of the show, even the ones that like weren't my favorite, that maybe weren't like paced my favorite way. They also had a uniqueness to them, whether it was in that style of whatever animation they were using, or they just brought like a unique twist to their storytelling. They presented a unique Star Wars story that we haven't had a chance to consider to this point. This season's full of winners. Don't sleep on it. Don't skip on it. It's awesome. Just check it out. I'm not going to pick a favorite. I'm not. Again, Sith, Bandits of Golak, they're right near to the top. But everything else was pretty darn entertaining too. I Am Your Mother. Massively entertaining episode of this season. So I can't pick a favorite at this point. Maybe we'll revisit this down the road and I will name one. But don't skip on the series. Check it out. It's great. All right, let's wrap things up. This went on a little bit longer than I thought it would already, so I'm sorry about that. We're going to be back very soon. Again, we're kicking off the Star Wars, the Clone Wars rewatch series. We will be returning with those next week, and we go into some really, really pivotal episodes of that series, not just for the show overall, but for The Mandalorian. You know, for the things we saw in this past season of The Mandalorian, and we also get to like a turning point, a massive turning point in the life of our favorite Jedi apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. And that's coming up as we conclude our run through Season 5 of Star Wars The Clone Wars. We kick those off again next week. And it's, 7 episodes of just insane entertainment. So just keep your bucket on. Just keep it on, because you're going to need it, because you're going to bump your head with the level of excitement. You're just going to jump out of your seat and hit your head on something. Keep your bucket on. All right, my friends, Buckethead Nation, you are the best. I would not be here without you all. I thank you for your support. If you have a chance on whatever platform you listen to the podcast on and you want to give us 5-star reviews, those are a great way to support the show. Help small independent shows like us stand out, not get lost in the cosmic shuffle. Make sure you're following us on social media at Mando_Vision, Twitter and Instagram. Email the show with your big thoughts, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right, Buckethead Nation. This podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.